Nezich Hanau. 40-year-old Anna Nezich Hanau was going through a bitter divorce from her husband David Nezich in late 2023 when she decided she needed a fresh start. She packed her things and left her home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a rented apartment in the Spanish capital of Madrid. Anna kept in touch daily with her friends and family members, and everything seemed to be going fine until early February of 2024. That was when she suddenly stopped communicating with her loved ones. Her neighbors also last saw her that same day. The next day, the missing woman's friend, Sana Ramo, received a text message from Anna's phone claiming that she had met a new man in the street. It went on to say that they had an instant connection and that Anna planned to travel to the man's rural home 2 hours outside of Madrid, but that the cell signal was poor. Ramo told news station WSVN that she asked for the specific location of the man's residence, but she didn't get a straight answer. She also said that she cautioned Anna against running off with a man she had just met, but Ramo does not believe she was communicating with Anna. She thinks someone else was using her friend's phone and that Anna had been taken against her will. Several other people received strangely worded messages from Anna's phone number. They contacted Spanish authorities and an investigation was launched. During a visit to Anna's apartment, investigators quickly noticed that her laptop, cell phone, and chargers were absent from the scene. Surveillance footage from Anna's apartment building showed a man in a helmet spray painting 2 camera lenses around the time of her disappearance. An hour later, he was seen leaving the building with a suitcase. From the beginning of the investigation, David Nezich has insisted that he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance, but the authorities believe otherwise, and in May of 2024, he was arrested on suspicion of Anna's murder. Prosecutors allege that Nezich is the man who spray painted the camera lenses at Anna's apartment building, while Nezich maintains that he's never been to Spain. According to the most recent updates on the case, the FBI and the Spanish National Police are currently carrying out searches for Anna's body. They seem to be focusing on wooded areas, canals, and streams, but have not announced any major discoveries so far. Number 7. Sarah Hartsfield. Sarah Jean Hartsfield married her first of 5 husbands, high school sweetheart Titus Nornschild, during the early 90s. Nornschild quickly discovered that Hartsfield had a jealous and controlling side, and within months the couple's newly wedded bliss had given way to constant fighting. Sarah's cheating proved to be the final straw before she and Nornschild divorced in 1995. Hartsfield went on to have a very brief second marriage before entering her third and longest marriage to Ryan Donahue in 1999. The couple met while they were both serving in the military and went on to raise 4 children in Fort Hood, Texas. During the couple's 17 years together, Sarah had at least 2 affairs with men in other states, including one that lasted for 2 years. By the time Ryan and Sarah separated in 2016, she was already in yet another long-distance relationship with a military veteran named David Bragg. Following her divorce from Ryan, she and Bragg got engaged and moved in together in Douglas County, Minnesota. During one of the couple's frequent arguments in 2018, Sarah fatally shot Bragg. She claimed she had acted in self-defense and no criminal charges were immediately brought against her. 6 months after Bragg's death, Sarah married husband number 4, David George. The marriage was short-lived, and in 2022, Sarah tied the knot with her 5th husband, Joseph Hartsfield. Less than a year later, Joseph died of a suspected insulin overdose. Authorities concluded that Sarah had purposely overdosed him and charged her with Joseph's murder. According to Joseph's family, he had recently revealed that he was planning to leave Sarah, who remained behind bars while awaiting trial. She is now under scrutiny for Bragg's death as well, and denies deliberately killing either of the men. Several of Sarah's family members have spoken out against her claims of innocence, including her 2 adult children. They even believe she may be responsible for more crimes, including the suspicious deaths of her younger brother and biological father. A trial date was originally set for May of 2024, but the case appears to be delayed. Number 6. Alri Scott. 43-year-old Carrie Allen disappeared in November of 2022 after going on a date at a sports bar in Omaha, Nebraska. When her family went to check on her, they found bullet holes in the wall of her home, but Carrie herself was nowhere in sight. Surveillance footage quickly led investigators to the missing woman's ex-boyfriend, 47-year-old Alri Scott. He could be seen lurking in the bar's parking lot before driving to Allen's neighborhood. Scott had tracked Allen through Snapchat death and driven nearly 3 hours from his home in Topeka, Kansas. Security video from Alan's neighbors showed Scott parking his SUV at a construction site and walking to her residence, where he most likely got inside using the garage keypad. At around 3 a.m., Alan's car was seen leaving the home and driving to where Scott's SUV was parked. According to prosecutors, he transferred Alan's lifeless body into his SUV, then drove her car back to her house. He ran back to his SUV and headed back toward Kansas. GPS data from Scott's OnStar system led detectives to an abandoned farmhouse in Topeka, where Alan's body was buried. She died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. Scott was also connected to the crime through other evidence, including phone location data. By the time an arrest warrant was issued, Scott had fled to Central America. After 18 days on the run, he was captured in Belize and extradited to the US, where he faced murder and kidnapping charges in connection with Alan's death. During Scott's trial in March of 2023, his defense attorney argued that he killed Alan in self-defense, even though one of Scott's friends claimed that he had confessed to shooting Alan during an argument. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and use of a weapon to commit a felony. He was sentenced to life without parole. Number 5. Christopher Macky Kaufman. A Georgia man stalked his ex-girlfriend and child's mother so relentlessly that when he gets out of prison, he'll be banned from living in the state. 39-year-old Christopher Macky Kaufman allegedly abused a woman, identified as SZ in court documents, during their relationship. She never called the police during that time because Kaufman threatened to kill her if she reported his crimes, but she eventually became fed up and broke up with him. Kaufman's first stalking arrest came in 2016 when he was caught watching the victim's home, calling her incessantly and sleeping in a trailer in her yard. Based on this incident alone, he was convicted of 22 misdemeanors, including stalking and harassment, and was sentenced to jail time. The judge granted a permanent no-contact order, which Kaufman disobeyed repeatedly, and he was subsequently convicted in 4 more stalking cases involving the same victim. Even when he was incarcerated, he managed to get his hands on contraband cell phones, which he used to contact the woman from prison. He also used the prison's phones to place dozens of calls, sent letters to the victim professing his love for her, and had people on the outside contact her on his behalf. In Kaufman's most recent case, he pleaded guilty to 6 counts of aggravated stalking and 5 counts of violating a protective order. In May of 2024, the court sentenced him to 35 years with the requirement to serve 15 years in prison. He's scheduled to be released in 2039, at which point he will be required to leave Georgia. Number 4. Mitchell Pierce. In what one prosecutor described as one of the worst ever stalking cases his office had ever tried, 46-year-old Mitchell Pierce of Muskegon, Michigan, relentlessly harassed and threatened his wife for months starting in late 2021. The disturbing campaign of torment began after Pierce was convicted of assaulting the woman with a deadly weapon, prompting the judge to issue a no-contact protective order. 4 months later, Pierce began contacting his ex on a regular basis, despite the order remaining in effect. Named in court documents as MS, the victim was subjected to a deluge of text messages, voicemails, social media messages, and emails threatening to harm her and her family. The unwanted contact continued for more than 4 months before Pierce began threatening the woman's new boyfriend. In May of 2022, someone fired shots at the man's house. During that same time period, Pierce crashed his vehicle into his ex's minivan in a parking lot. Terrified for her life, the victim struck him twice with her van as he approached. Pierce fled the scene, leaving behind a rental Jeep with multiple guns, ammunition, and a bulletproof vest inside. Authorities charged Pierce for his crimes, adding to a lengthy documented history of violence toward women. He pleaded guilty to federal charges of stalking and being a felon in possession of a firearm, and was sentenced to 15 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Number 3. Tony Blazejowski. 50-year-old Joe Good ended his volatile relationship with 41-year-old Tony Blazejowski in 2012 because he was tired of walking on eggshells. He later told ABC News that the relationship started out great, but that Tony became upset easily. This tendency worsened over time and eventually became unbearable. Less than an hour after the breakup, Blazejowski embarked on a relentless stalking and harassment campaign against her ex. First, she hacked Good Good's email and sent an explicit photo of him to his employer. She also accused him of having an affair with a co-worker, eventually causing him to lose his job of 24 years. Blazejowski also showed up at a police station with a busted lip, claiming Good had beaten her, and filed other false reports against him, landing him at the center of a humiliating investigation. Things got even worse when Blazejowski began contacting authorities with phony complaints that he was harming his kids. She also targeted Good's new girlfriend and her landlord with letters threatening to burn the woman's house down if she wasn't evicted within 30 days. Police initially took Blazejowski's side. Good was arrested several times before investigators realized that he was the real victim. A search of Tawny's home and computer provided authorities with all the evidence the authorities needed to pursue a case against her. In 2014, Blazejowski was convicted of 4 counts of aggravated stalking, 3 counts of threats for extortion, and 1 count of false report of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but was eventually convicted of 3 more extortion charges and ordered to serve more time. Records show that she's due to be released in 2027. Number 2. Justin Cole Caroll. 24-year-old Denasia Alexis Holloway broke up with Justin Cole Caroll in 2020 after he was convicted of assaulting her. The pair had only dated for a matter of months, but it was long enough for Holloway to discover that Caroll had a violent and controlling side. A judge banned Caroll from having any contact with Holloway, but he ignored the order. In May of 2021, he followed Holloway to her apartment complex in Waterboro, South Carolina. Holloway noticed her ex's car and parked next to a police car belonging to one of the building's residents, hoping it would discourage Caroll from bothering her. She locked the doors of her car and posted a Snapchat video which showed Caroll standing in the background as she told her followers about his blatant refusal to leave her alone. Just moments later, Caroll fired 4 .40 caliber bullets into Holloway's head and neck, then fled the scene. He was arrested 2 days later. When the former couple first started dating, Caroll had recently been released from prison after serving part of a 3-year sentence for gun, drug, and assault and battery charges. He was out on bail for the previous domestic violence case involving Holloway when he shot the young woman, leading her family to believe that her death would have been prevented if he had been kept in prison for his full term. In April of 2024, Caroll was found guilty of Holloway's murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Stephen Faber. After dating Stephen Faber for 7 weeks, a California woman named Kim ended the relationship in May of 2015. She told Faber to stop contacting her, but he continued to barrage her with unwanted correspondence, prompting her to obtain a no-contact restraining order. According to court documents, Faber violated the order within a half hour of being served by text messaging Kim. He continued to flood her phone with messages from his regular phone number, and she received messages from other numbers that were suspected to belong to Faber. Kim reminded Faber that he was violating the restraining order, but the messages kept coming. Most of the messages blamed Kim for things that were going wrong in Faber's life. He also complained about his ex-wife, who he claimed had obtained a restraining order against him based on false allegations. Faber even went as far as claiming that Kim was abusing him by refusing to continue their relationship. The harassment became so constant that Kim disconnected her personal phone line, but Faber simply started harassing her on her work phone. She disconnected the work phone, and Faber began showing up at her apartment and leaving letters and gifts at her doorstep. He also started contacting Kim from fake social media accounts and sending her hostile emails. One handwritten letter that Kim found on her car windshield stated, "I don't want to watch you get hurt. Please be smart." Kim contacted the police over 10 times to report Faber's restraining order violations, and he was eventually arrested for his crimes. In 2016, a jury convicted him of 13 misdemeanor counts of violating a protective order. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. Faber claimed that he only violated the order of protection because he was confused about their breakup and wanted to know why Kim ended the relationship. He appealed his case, arguing that his sentence for misdemeanors was longer than he would have faced on a single felony stalking charge. But the judge ruled that Faber's sentence is not disproportionate to his crimes, and the original verdict and punishment were upheld. Number 9. Grant Amato. After losing his job as a nurse in 2018, Grant Amato became obsessed with a Bulgarian webcam model named Sylvie. He gave thousands of dollars to Sylvie in exchange for her time and attention. When he ran out of money, he began stealing it from the family members he shared a home with in Seminole County, Florida. In just a few months, he spent $200,000 communicating with Sylvie. Amato's family encouraged him to get mental help and even paid $15,000 to send him to a rehab facility for pornography addicts. His family let him come home in early 2019 under the conditions that he got a job and had zero contact with Sylvie. Within days, his father Chad caught him talking to Sylvie and told him to pack his things and leave. Amato shot his mother Margaret in the back of the head while she was using the family computer. He shot his father and brother as they walked in the house and attempted to stage the scene as a murder-suicide. After finding the family dead during a welfare check, deputies tracked Amato down at a local hotel and took him into custody. He gave conflicting stories but maintained his innocence and was ultimately convicted in the triple homicide. A jury declined to pursue the death penalty, so he received 3 life sentences. Number 8. Franchesca Keel. 56-year-old Teresa Keel was arriving home at her apartment in Long Island, New York one night in 2016 when an attacker struck her in the face and head multiple times with a metal barbell. She suffered from severe brain and skull damage and remained in a vegetative state for 2 years until she died. Investigators discovered that Teresa's daughter, Franchesca Keel, had attached a GPS device to her mother's car before the attack. They also found a record of Franchesca calling the taxi company that picked up her boyfriend, corrections officer Ralph Kepler, near the scene. Additional evidence revealed that the couple had meticulously planned the crime. As it turned out, Francesca's family disapproved of her relationship with Kepler, who they thought was abusive and controlling. They were also involved in an ongoing money dispute with Kepler's family, which only deepened the tensions between the two parties. By the time Teresa was murdered, Franchesca had completely cut ties with her family. Kepler pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 22-year sentence. He'll be eligible for parole in 2040 at the age of 50. Franchesca was convicted of manslaughter and was sentenced to 13 years. She'll be 36 years old at her first opportunity for release in 2031. Number 7. Christopher Thompson. In early 2020, Paula Thompson told her friends that if anything happened to her, to look to her adult son, Christopher, as the culprit. She was trying to get the 31-year-old to move out of her home in Des Moines, Iowa, but he refused to leave or get a job. Christopher had an explosive temperament, especially when he drank, which was often. At one point, Paula called the police and reported that Christopher was banging on her windows and acting drunk and belligerent. By the time officers arrived, he had left the scene. Christopher was on probation for a past crime, and the cops advised Paula to contact his PO, especially since drinking violated the terms of his release. During an argument about Christopher's chronic refusal to work that occurred shortly after the police incident, Paula told her son that she was done supporting him and expressed her disappointment at him for going nowhere in life. Christopher snapped and bludgeoned Paula and her pet cat to death with a crowbar. He put her body in a bedroom and spent the next several days playing video games and drinking. When Paula's friend wouldn't stop calling him in an attempt to reach his mother, Christopher finally admitted that he had killed her. He went to Walmart, bought some popcorn chicken that he ate in his truck, and then turned himself in to police. Thompson was convicted of first-degree murder and is serving a life sentence. Number 6. Verity Beck. Relatives of Reed and Miriam Beck became concerned when they were unable to reach the senior citizens in early 2023. The couple's son went to check on them at their home in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, where they lived with their daughter, 43-year-old Verity Beck. When he arrived, he saw what looked like a body laying under a sheet. He dialed 911 as soon as he left the home. Officers were met with the unmistakable stench of decomposition when they arrived. They found Reed and Miriam's bodies in various states of dismemberment and a chainsaw nearby that they suspect Verity used to mutilate the remains. Both victims had been fatally shot. Authorities have yet to announce a motive for the killings, but they found evidence that someone had tried to break into a safe inside the house. Shortly before the 911 call was placed, Verity had told her brother that things were going badly in the household. He told her to call the police, but she said she needed more time. She was charged with first and second-degree murder and is being held without bail while awaiting the next steps in her case. Number 5. Terry Strawn. 6 days before Christmas in 2018, Hillsborough County, Florida Sheriff's Deputy Terry Strawn got on his radio and said he needed an emergency response because he had just killed his family. He explained where to find the bodies of his wife, Teresa, the couple's daughter, Courtney, and their granddaughter, and said that he would no longer be alive when they arrived at the scene. Strawn's colleagues did everything in their power to talk him down, but his mind was set. He asked for God's forgiveness and urged the department to make sure it gets help for employees who struggle with depression. When his co-workers arrived, he spoke with them briefly and then took his own life. Investigators were baffled as they spent months trying to identify a motive in the tragic crime. Until the day he killed his family, Strawn was a model member of law enforcement. Throughout his 30-year career, his superiors and the public both praised his kindness and skills. He had even convinced a teenage boy to get help one day when he said he was struggling with dark thoughts. Strawn's twin brother, Perry, told investigators that Terry had complained about a supervisor after he retired in 2017, saying that the issues between them were one of the reasons he left the force. But the supervisor wrote good things about Terry in an evaluation from that same year, and the details of any problems they may have had are unclear. A nearly 500-page report obtained by the Tampa Bay Times details how Terry and Teresa moved to Colorado after his retirement, but they moved back to Florida just months later after realizing that they couldn't afford the type of lifestyle they wanted there. But Strawn seemed excited to be back in Florida, where he had recently gotten approved to return to the force full-time. There were also no major issues in his marriage, other than the typical things couples sometimes fight over, like jealousy, and they seemed to be getting along in their most recent text conversation. And while he had mentioned money issues from time to time, he never seemed deeply distraught. Perhaps the biggest clues to what Strawn was going through are in some of his final transmissions to his co-workers. He said he had lost everything and had health problems, and it was clear that he was suffering from mental and emotional demons that he had kept well hidden until then. But the lack of clarity about what was going on in his mind left his co-workers and surviving loved ones without the answers they were hoping for. Number 4. Jimmy Robertson. 49-year-old Terry Robertson's colleagues became worried when she was a no-call, no-show for an important work meeting one day in 1997. A co-worker went to check on her at her home in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and found Terry and her husband Earl dead from horrific injuries. There was blood everywhere, including on the ceiling. Someone had slashed and bludgeoned the couple to death, leaving them with catastrophic head injuries, deep stab wounds, and other signs of a double murder that was carried out in a cold-blooded rage. Investigators were quick to turn their attention to the Robertsons' 21-year-old son, Jimmy, who had recently moved back in with his parents after flunking out of college and getting into drugs. Although Earl and Terry had welcomed Jimmy back into their home, they cut him off financially and refused to support his drinking and drug habits in any way. Law enforcement suspected that he flew off the handle and murdered the victims, and that he may have also been motivated by the prospect of inheriting their $2.2 million estate, but he never got his hands on any of the money. Instead, Jimmy and his girlfriend, Meredith Moon, were arrested on suspicion of murder. Moon, who claimed she waited outside in her car for Jimmy and played no part in the killings, took a deal and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of accessory after the fact. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Due to the gruesome nature of the crime, prosecutors pursued the death penalty in Jimmy's case. The jury agreed that it was an appropriate punishment. The convicted double murderer was initially slated to be executed in 2005, but he has managed to delay it through appeals. He remains on death row today, and it's unclear whether he has a scheduled execution date. Number 3. Andrew and Elizabeth Hes. In 2008, a man named Martin Weltman called 911 and reported his roommate, 46-year-old Edwin Hes, missing from their Andover, Minnesota home. Edwin's car had also vanished, and there was a large pool of blood in the driveway. Anoka County deputies immediately smelled bleach when they arrived at the scene. They found a crossbow, hammers, and a baseball bat strategically hidden on the property, as if someone had placed them there with plans to use them during an attack. Weltman told investigators that Edwin was entangled in a long-standing dispute with his siblings, Elizabeth and Andrew Hes. They were at odds over money after finding out that Edwin had skimmed a family business and sold their grandmother's stocks for $600,000. Edwin distanced himself from his family and got orders of protection against his siblings, but their disagreements only intensified with time. At one point, Andrew was arrested for trying to run Edwin off a road. After his disappearance, police saw Andrew and Elizabeth sitting together in a parking lot near Edwin's home. Law enforcement returned later that day and found a similar crossbow to the one found at Edwin's house, along with a jacket, a container of bleach, and blood-stained rubber gloves. After failing to turn up any sign of Edwin in the local area, the Anoka County Sheriff's Department contacted authorities 200 miles, 322 kilometers away in Cottonswood County, where Andrew's girlfriend had a farm. A deputy arrived to find human remains being burned at the property, which were later identified as Edwin Hes. Authorities then found the victim's car outside a church, covered in blood and with a bloody sledgehammer in the trunk. The evidence told a heartbreaking story of the torture Edwin suffered at the hands of his killers, who shot him with a crossbow, beat him, ran him over or dragged him with a car, and set his body on fire. Andrew and Elizabeth are both serving life sentences for their brother's murder. Number 2. Deadly Inheritance Feud. 48-year-old Michael Brown inherited several properties in Jamaica when his mother passed away in early 2023. He flew there from Hertfordshire, England, to put his mother to rest and to check up on a house he had started building prior to her death, which he planned to stay in during future visits. 4 days after the funeral, someone opened fire on Brown while he was in bed and shot him multiple times in the back. He was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead from his injuries. At the time, the victim was embroiled in a family feud about his recently inherited properties, and there are rumors that the dispute escalated into a heated and bitter argument shortly before Brown's death. Manchester Police Superintendent Shane McCullough told the Jamaica Observer that the dispute had been ongoing since 2015 and that they had intervened on numerous occasions, including in the days leading up to the murder. McCullough said that the family is feuding over 5 houses and that responding officers had taken all necessary action during their most recent interaction with the family. She also confirmed that 2 persons of interest had been taken into custody and were questioned for hours following Brown's death. Number 1. Colin CG Haney. One day in 2020, a young man named Colin CG Haney fatally shot his mother, Consuela Alejandra Haney, and 3 of his siblings, one by one, as they arrived at the family's home in Grantsville, Utah. He also tried to kill his father, Colin Haney Sr., who managed to wrestle the gun out of CJ's possession despite being shot in the leg. It was Utah's deadliest mass shooting in 13 years, and the first homicide in Grantsville in 20 years. Haney Sr. survived, and CJ also had a brother who was away at college at the time. CJ turned himself into authorities later that day. He never gave a motive for massacring his family, but allegedly told his father that he had planned to kill the entire family. Prosecutors declined to pursue the death penalty due to his age, but tried him as an adult due to the heinous nature of the crime. As part of a deal with prosecutors, CJ pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life in prison and will remain in the juvenile justice system until he's 25. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have an ex that you always had to see at work, or have an ex that coincidentally shows back up in your life once you found a new partner? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.